Hey, welcome back to my channel, Youth Doc. Today we're going to talk about the importance of youth ministry in light of family ministry. One of the current trends we're dealing with right now is this aspect of family ministry and the downplay on youth ministry. This was introduced to me the first time in 1994 with Richard Ross. I was down at Lifeway in a class, basic seminar in youth ministry, where he introduced this concept of getting rid of all the youth pastors and hiring us back with double our pay, which we liked, as a family minister. But as I began to process that later in my years of ministry, there were some issues and some thoughts that I had behind that I really want to share now, and I've shared with some others in various situations. The reason that this can seem to make sense is because there's this aspect in many ministries, youth ministries, where it's youth ministry versus the parents. So it's not alongside, it's a us versus them concept, where they're actually feel like that we're doing better for the teenagers than the parents. The parents are holding them back. The parents don't understand, and so the parents have wrong priorities, and so we're more important than the parents. I happened to be sitting in a meeting at Lifeway years ago where we were in a roundtable discussion, and it began to degrade with this group of youth ministers, all youth ministers, about 12 or 15. It began to degrade to the point of everybody began to bash the parents over and over. And I listened for a little while, and finally I just sat up to the table and I looked at them and I said, guys, we're totally wrong here. Because the parents are the parents, and God didn't place us in the role of the parent. And if the parents are doing wrong, that's between God and them, and we may be able to help the parents, but we're bashing the parents, and God never gave us permission to do that. And so that permeates some youth ministry, and I think it has created a reaction to this concept of let's have family ministry instead of parent ministry. And so we come to this place where I think the reason that people argue for family ministry versus youth ministry sometimes is this aspect that we have not supported the parents like we should. It's been an us versus them. Another reason for family ministry is in some of our churches, especially as our churches got larger and we began to segregate out and space out and such, we find ourselves in a situation where the youth ministry is totally separate from the parent ministry. One pastor I heard that was struggling with their church said that basically the parents drove up to church and in the process dropped off the kids in children's ministry, dropped off the youth in youth ministry. They went to their adult ministry and they stayed apart the whole time, and then they finally came back together at the end of the day when they all got back in the car and went home. And they were struggling with that concept. This pastor was struggling with that concept. In some churches, and I've been in churches where you have the youth section where all the youth sit together. So even in worship, they're sitting away from their parents. I happen to be blessed right now to be in a church where my kids, my teenagers, pretty much sit with their parents. And I've looked at people and said, why would I start a student section when my students are sitting with their parents, which is a great place for them to be? Once again, it's a blend, not a us versus them, but a blend in our ministry. And we see that in where the kids sat or the students sat in church. And then the last big argument that I wrote down was that youth ministry is not in the Bible. So why in the world would we argue for having youth ministry? Because since it's not in the Bible, we shouldn't have it. Well, I would argue this, that if you want to be totally biblical in all things, there's plenty of things we do that's not in the Bible, and maybe we should get rid of them. Or there's some examples. My great example in the Bible is the example of bathrooms. There's only one example of bathrooms in the entire Bible, and that's when Saul goes into the cave to relieve himself, and David cuts off a piece of his tunic. So from my perspective, if it has to be in the Bible, then every church should be built over a cave. Now, some of y'all are going, Rick, that's really stupid, and I agree that it's really stupid. But I think saying just because there's not youth ministry in the Bible, then youth ministry is not something we should have. In my doctoral dissertation, as well as when you look historically, adolescence is a fairly new phenomenon. That's why youth ministry is a fairly new ministry. So when you're looking at the context of the Bible, there was no adolescence. You went from childhood to adulthood, and it pretty much happened fairly quickly. There was not much in between there of this in-between time. But with the Industrial Revolution, with mandatory school, we have created adolescence. And so there's this longer gap to go from child to adulthood in the United States. And because of that, I feel that youth ministry has a vital purpose here in the United States. In that change within our society, then it creates a longer period of the teenagers growing away from their parents. I tell parents quite regularly that it's your job to take your teenager, and it's different for each teenager that you have because of just their maturity level, but it's your job to take them from childhood to adulthood, from about 12 years old to 18 years old. And if you can do that, you're going to raise a decent student, a decent adult, a young adult's going to come out of that. If you hold on too long, and you don't give them freedom as they're growing up, and you hold on and make them hold on to them like a child up till they're 18. When they turn 18, they can't handle it because they've never made any decisions. They've messed up, made mistakes, and so they really mess up there. If you let go too early, you say, well, you're a teenager now, so just do whatever you want. They can't handle it either. It is the parent's responsibility to make that growth. And so in that, we have this span of time that is now out there called adolescence, where teenagers are beginning to grow away from their parents. And we as a ministry can help parents, and we as a youth ministry can help students in that. Adolescence is a time where teenagers are developing their own faith. It's a time where they begin to grow away from their parents' faith and they grow into their own faith, and a good student ministry helps that to take place. That they internalize their own faith. They grow in that. The Anabaptist movement felt like that you couldn't even accept Christ until you were in your teen years because you really didn't understand the concept of surrender or lordship. And so that concept there of moving into a lordship, moving into surrender is something that happens in the teen years for most students. And a good youth ministry helps in that. And even in that, supporting the parents to help them help their teenager grow in their faith, but it's also a growing of faith away from the parents to where it becomes their own personal faith. Children many times are riding on the coattails, so to speak, of their parents' faith. In adolescence, it begins to become their own. They begin to internalize it themselves. Which brings me to a good youth ministry is going to help the teenager develop their faith. You're going to walk them through things and help them wrestle with their faith, to wrestle closer to God, to move more to a place of surrender, and to see what God has in their life. From moving from a child into adulthood, the youth ministry comes alongside, a good youth ministry comes alongside of the parents in this process to help the teenager. I do believe in youth ministry. I do believe that family ministry is good, but I don't think you negate youth ministry by bringing in a quote-unquote family minister. So as a youth minister, the one thing that you can do to help this concept is to support families. Understand it's not a us versus them. Make sure you come alongside of them. And if you're not a parent yet, you're going to have to bring some people in. You're going to have to listen to some people to help you better understand how to come alongside of those parents. If you're a parent of a child, I can tell you, when you become a parent of a teenager, things change in your mind. And you become a part of that club, and your family ministry to parents of teens is going to be much better the minute you have your first teenager. I was at a youth specialties conference one time, and we're sitting around in a group, and one of the youth ministers was in his 20s probably. At that time I was in my 40s, but he looks and he goes, guys, I just wonder about parent ministry. How can you have a good parent ministry? And I just looked at him and I smiled and I said, have a teenager of your own. And of course he was too young to have that, and he kind of looked at me weird, and I just smiled and I said, no, really and truthfully, that's the best way. The second best way is make sure you have parents involved. Make sure that you're listening to parents. Make sure you're trying to help guide them by listening to their struggles and what's going on with them. Bring in some experts to help them that do have teenagers or raised teenagers but still understand youth ministry. Look for some counselors that can help in that way. But basically, you support the family aspect of your ministry. And if you have teenagers of your own, you just walk beside parents. As you walk and as you struggle, you walk beside parents. And it helps to support your parent ministry. And then as a youth minister, when you recognize that you're an extension of the family, that you're a part of that family and you're the extension, that you're helping every family there to do a better job with their kids. So whether that's in your educational process, whether that's walking along beside parents, listening to them, counseling them, or teaching the parents, teaching the teens, honoring the parents when the kids come to you and say, hey, my parents, da 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 da. In most of those cases, it's the parents who are right, and your job as youth pastor is to coach your teenagers in how to help them better understand their parents and better work with their parents, to see that side and understand how to work with that, not take the teenager's side against the parents. Those kind of things help you in this aspect of recognizing you're an extension of the parents' ministry. You're not the ministry, and hopefully the parents are there to the side every now and then. You're an extension of their ministry. Get that in your mindset. It'll help this issue. And then last, so just understand that God established the family, not youth ministry. That point is valid. That point is real. And even after I talked about the cultural change that has occurred since the Bible was written, the fact of the matter is, there's nowhere in the Bible that establishes youth ministry, but it does establish the family. So then as a youth minister, once again, learning how to come alongside that family, to help that family out, to be there for that family, to walk beside that family is key in part of what your ministry is. I'll close out with this, that many times when I'm in a parent and teen structure where there's an event where parents and teens are there, I'll spend as much or more time sitting around chatting with parents than I do the teenagers. Just because that's where a lot of my investment's at and needs to be. A lot of my counseling to parents about issues isn't in my office sitting across the desk in kind of a counseling situation. It's standing in the hallways of the church, listening to what's going on in their home and giving them some biblical advice and some practical advice about parenting based on me being a parent of a long time ago, but teenagers. All my kids are adults now, but while I was walking through that and now that I'm past. And so guys, looking for those opportunities to pour into parents because they're just as important. You need to help the parents understand their teenagers are supposed to grow past them. You need to help them understand that teenagers are supposed to develop their own personal faith during this time. These are some things you can help parents with that'll strengthen your ministry. Appreciate you watching. If you want to make some comments, you may disagree, you may agree with this. I'll leave it up to you. I just wanted to throw this subject out there because I'm passionate about youth ministry, but I'm also passionate that yes, parent ministry and parenting is biblical, but I do see a place where youth ministry fits into that. And sometimes I think we've pushed the other way, and almost the concept, the old proverbial, threw the baby out with the bathwater is what some churches have done. I still see youth ministry as very vital, very important in this process when we line up where we're supposed to be, in line with the parents and not against the parents. So guys, I appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll look to hear from you either through comments. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. I'm trying to produce a video just about every Tuesday to have it up by noon on Tuesday. Once again, thanks for watching.